Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 60 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back for the second episode this week of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Today we have a really fun show. We've got Roger Sigler from Antler Dogs. Roger has a different spin on training an antler dog than the guests we've had previously. I was a little bit shocked to hear some of the answers to his question, or to the questions that I had asked him, because one of the things that I had often struggled with was, having come from the Labrador Retriever side of the world and training duck dogs, how could you ever get a dog to respond to a bone like they respond to a living, breathing bird? Because a bird certainly has got to be a ton more fun than an antler. So that's one of the questions that I always had and sort of struggled with and couldn't really wrap my brain around. Well, Roger answers that. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Mr. Roger Sigler. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Tonight I have as a co-host Mr. Donnie Monroe down in Kansas. Donnie, how's it going this evening?
It's going very well.
Going very
well.
How you doing? I'm doing, I got to be doing good. I found a shed today. I stumbled right on one.
Oh, that's right. I seen that on Facebook. That's awesome.
It looked like a snowball on a black sheet. That's how obvious it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that was that's on your new property that you have?
Yeah, yep, that's on the new lease, yep.
Good. Awesome.
So, tell us about our guest tonight.
Well, tonight we have Roger Sigler with Antler Dogs. And I met Roger last year, and I've been looking at trying to get some help trying to find some sheds, and wanted to get a dog and start training, and I found out that it's definitely harder to train yourself when you have no prior experience training a dog. So ended up getting a hold of Roger, and I've known him now for right around a year, I think. And anyway, I found out that Roger, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the pioneers that actually started training dogs to find sheds. And he and his wife, Sharon, and their daughter, Amy, they have trained a lot of dogs that have found a lot of sheds. So I want to welcome Roger. How you doing, Roger?
I'm doing great. Really good.
Awesome.
Hey, Roger.
Have I sold a
Hey, hi.
statement so far? You definitely one of the pioneers. That's correct, right?
Well, we actually invented the sport 13 years ago, the commercial aspect of it. And in the last 13 years, we've trained almost 500 of these dogs, have them all over the United States, Canada, and Europe. So I think that there's no one that's come. For the first 5 years, no one even knew what these dogs were. But today, it's the fastest growing dog sport in the country.
Now, do you primarily just see labs, Roger, or are you doing all breeds?
No, we're only using labs.
Okay.
My wife and I, we've been training dogs professionally since back in the 60s. Actually, we kind of consider ourselves animal trainers. When we started back in the 60s, we were in the dental business, but we didn't play golf or tennis, so we'd train bird dogs all summer long, and then in the fall, we'd take our doctor customers to Canada and would hunt birds on the prairie. We used hunting like a lot of guys use golf or tennis. So first year we went up, we took 8 doctors and 18 dogs. So we did that for years, so I'm very familiar with just about any breed of hunting dog, golden retrievers, chesses, water spaniels, Brittany's. I mean, you name it. I've trained probably 1,000 different pointing or retrieving breeds.
Wow. Okay. So it's safe to say you probably know Mary Hawley.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Mary's been a good customer of mine for a long, long time.
Awesome.
that's how small this world is. So it sounds like you've been training shed dogs since somewhere around, if memory serves me correctly, around 2008 and
2005. Actually,
2005. 2005. Okay. All right. And now you've got one in Don's hands.
Right.
How's that going, Don?
Well, he doesn't have it yet. We're working on it.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So
and Roger, before we go even further, I think Roger, you've trained a lot of other animals as well, right? When you said animal training, I think you.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
you've been involved in a lot of different aspects for just animal training.
Yeah. Well, once a year or so, we'll go to California and we work with the top marine mammal trainers, where they're training sea lions, and we're training horses and dogs and birds. And I've trained birds along with dogs and horses and mules, just a lot of different kind of animals. When you're training at a really high level, when I'm talking about specialty animals, especially, dogs, bomb dogs, drug dogs, search and rescue dogs, cancer detection dogs, any of those higher level dogs, you're training at a very high level, meaning that for the most part, you should be able to cross species over into horses or other kinds of animals as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and one thing that what I found personally was, trying to train a dog that I had myself. I wasn't aware, but when I had him interested in sheds, and then the first thing when he found what a quail was, he was totally turned off of the shed and was all about the live bird. And that's where Roger said, that's where I guess I got a new respect for the level of training that he's talking about, and kind of comparing it to finding drugs, a dog that specializes in that. And it takes a whole nother level of training to get there, and sometimes even a whole nother level of dog. Because I found really quick that any dog, once you put something live in front of them, they're going to get a lot more excited about that. So I guess that's where, where Roger's training and his expertise and, bomb dogs and so forth really helps, kind of deliver that. And I've watched a couple seminars he's done, and it's really starting to make sense. And that's one reason that I'm actually getting a dog from Roger.
So I've trained, I don't know, a half dozen labs in my life, but none of them for shed hunting. It's always been for duck hunting back when I did that kind of thing. What's the biggest difference that you see in the two kinds of training?
Well, I think that you've got to follow my history, and you have to kind of be patient with me. When I was training hunting dogs, I was training what's called fear-based training. And in fear-based training, the animal gets punished for every wrong decision. Okay? And I trained fear-based training for about 25 years. And I've always been a student of anything that I've been involved with. And about 25 years ago, I was taking courses from different trainers around the country. And one day I was studying the internet, and I came across a site. It was entitled "Come to Chicken Training Camp and Train Chickens." And I thought, this must be some kind of joke. But the more I read, I realized that these were the greatest animal trainers that ever lived, bar none. There's no one that can even come close to these folks. I don't care Caesar, or I don't care who you're talking about. Now, who were these folks? Well, back in the 1940s, the military wanted to train dolphins to do military work, like deliver payloads between submarines and those types of things. So they hired conventional horse and dog trainers to try to train these dolphins. Well, because the method that they were trained under, fear-based training, when the military got them back, took them out into the open ocean and asked them to go to work, rather than go to work, they swam away because of the methods they were trained under. So in the 1940s, the father of modern-day psychiatry and psychology is a guy by the name of B.F. Skinner. And anyone who's taken any psych knows who Skinner is. Well, if you trained with Skinner, you were an animal trainer because he wanted to test all of his theories on non-human animals to see how they learn so he could apply it over to humans. And so the military hires Skinner to see if he could train these dolphins. Well, he was busy with the human side, so he had two lab assistants, a couple by the name of Marion and Bob Breland and another guy by the name of Ogden Lindley, and they went to work on the animal side. And today, anyone who trains at a high level, like at SeaWorld or Disney or for the movies, they're all using some form of what Skinner's students taught them. Now, when this was all during the war, and they were doing all kinds of projects with animals, mostly FBI, CIA, training them to do certain things. Well, after the war, the Baileys, one of Skinner's lab assistants, moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they set up a training institute, and you could go and study with them, and you could stay a day, a week, a month, a year. It didn't make any difference if you were training pigs in France or elephants in India. And while you were there, you trained one animal and one animal only. And do you know what those were?
What?
Chickens.
I have no idea.
Because if you can train a chicken, you can train any other animal. Now, at that time, I thought I was a trainer, but I wasn't there 5 minutes, and I realized that I didn't know a single solitary thing about animal training. I knew how to herd them, but I didn't know how to get them to cooperate with you. So they trained somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 animals, 140 different species, to do, as I said, mostly real advanced military stuff, CIA type of stuff. And the way that they worked is in the old Charlie's Angels series, the government would give Charlie an assignment, and he would either accept it or and if he did, then they'd have to figure out how to do it. Well, the Baileys were doing the same thing, and some of the things that, when I started to watch the kind of things that they were training animals to do, it blew me away. They were training seagulls that would go out into the open ocean and locate down flyers. They would train crows to do spy work in downtown New York City. They would train, during the Vietnam War, they trained what was called a squab squad. And the squab squad were homing pigeons that would search the jungle for enemy snipers, report back to our troops where they were so that we could then kill them. But probably the most amazing thing that they trained, I still think about this, is crazy. All the original guided missile systems were 3 homing pigeons in the nose cone of a smart bomb. These pigeons were in harnesses, and in front of them, they were in these harnesses. They couldn't move, but they could peck, and they had screens in front of them. And they would peck the logistics to the jets and guide the bombs into the bomb sites as accurate as laser bombs. So we're not talking about guys that are just training a dog to retrieve a piece of bone. We're talking about incredible stuff. Yeah. So when I studied with them, I started to realize that, once again, I didn't know anything about training, and I had to change everything within my program. Now, along the way, I had trained dogs to bite people. I work with the top bomb dog and drug dog trainers in the country. I qualified as a dog for FEMA search and rescue program after 9/11. I was a head dog trainer at the men's prison in Lansing, Kansas, where I was over 35 inmates and 100 dogs. So I broke a lot of horses and trained mules, and so I worked with animals a lot. But when you're asking them to what we call the science of participative training, that's where the animal is working with you. You're not forcing the animal to do, but they're cooperating with you. And the perfect example of that is when we go to California and you watch the marine mammals train dolphins. Those dolphins are absolutely performing because they're the dolphin. When I lecture, I say people sitting in the audience watching the dolphin shows, a lot of them believe that those dolphins are out there because they just love people and want to entertain people. Well, they're doing it only for one reason. You know what that reason is?
The fish.
The fish.
The fish. Yeah.
It's about the fish. Okay. Without the fish, they do nothing. But with the fish, they do all of those remarkable things. And every animal, if you understand what motivates them, you can use that to get them to do what you want them to do, whether or not it's a horse, a dog, a pig, an elephant, I don't care what it is. Okay. But you're never beating the animal up. It's always the science of participative training when they're working with you. So with the background in and the people that I've studied with, whatever I wanted to train the animal to do short of physical capability, you had to kind of figure out how to get them to cooperate with you. Well, when 13 years ago, one of my friends mentioned, you train dogs, why don't you train them to find antlers? Well, I'd never thought about it because I just had, I'm not sure anybody else had either. So that started me in the pursuit of trying to figure out if, first of all, whether or not would it work, was it practical, could you get a dog to do it, did it make any kind of sense? And so originally all I had was a German Shepherd and a Pit Bull at that time, and so I started experimenting, and pretty quickly I started to see the potential. Now, I had the wrong breeds, okay, but once again, without cornering this whole conversation, as I lecture, one of the things that I say, and I mean, it's absolutely true, it's always about the quality of your dog. The higher the quality of your dog, the better the end result is going to be. And for example, if you want to hunt rabbits, you're going to get a beagle. If you want to work cattle, you're going to get a border collie. If you want a dog to bite people, you're going to get either a German Shepherd or Belgian Malinois. Well, for this sport, it's all about labs. I've tried probably 10 or 15 different breeds, and I've always I knew it was going to be labs, or I thought I did, but until you do some experimenting, you don't really know. But it is labs, but it's not just labs. It's very specific kind of labs where and they have to qualify through testing as to whether or not they're going to be the right dog. Now, with our program 13 years ago when we started, we just buy a litter here or a pup there and start to train it, hoping that somehow or another we had the right pup. But over the last 13 years, we've trained almost 500 of these dogs, have them, as I said, all over the United States and Canada and in Europe. And during that period, we've taken the top 5 males, we pull semen on them, we save it at K-State. When we have a first-class female, we sell her with a breeding agreement, and wherever she goes in the country, we ship semen to that family. They raise them till they're 8 weeks of age, and then we buy them all back. Now, when we get them at 8 weeks of age, they're all little and cute and fuzzy, but that doesn't tell you anything at all about their skill sets. So in our program, the Science of Participative Training, we start evaluating them at 10 weeks of age, and we're looking for very specific kinds of what we call drives. It's kind of like aptitude. Like if you're I use the example, if you had a business and you had 2 children, one of them was a great athlete and the other one was really good at math, and in your business your accountant quit, which one of your 2 children would you take into the business? Well, then you take the one that understood math. Well, exactly the same thing with the dogs. So as you're evaluating these dogs, your chances of, if you've got the right dog, your chances of getting these dogs trained to do the work, you can get it done. But if you've selected the wrong dog, it doesn't really make any difference. How good a trainer you are. An example of that would be, I can't train a collie to chase a rabbit like a beagle. You can't do it.
Makes
sense.
What
are some of the features that you kind of, I mean, even like some of the pups that you get for the, because you were telling me about, like, there's different levels of, kind of like, how many sheds they would find compared to you. Can you kind of explain, what you're looking for and what the differences, I guess, are in those dogs? And
well, I think that you kind of have to start with, some people say you can train any dog to do this. Well, they don't know much about dogs, because even under the best circumstances, if you have 5 puppies in a litter, okay, and you're testing them, and if you take the first one out, we're generally testing with a ball. That's one of the tests. We want to see what kind of response the dog has to that movement towards that ball. So if we take the first puppy out and we roll the ball out in front of him, we want to see what his response is going to be. If he just watches it roll out, he's probably not going to be a candidate. If we take puppy number 2 and we roll it out in front of him, he may run right out and look at it and keep right on going. He's probably not going to be a candidate. Puppy number 3, you take the ball, you roll it out in front of him, he runs right out and picks it up, carries it over a few feet, loses interest, and goes on his way. Not going to make it. Puppy number 4, you take the ball, you roll it out, he runs right out and gets it, brings it right back and puts it in your hand. Puppy number 5, you roll the ball out, it runs right out and snatches it, brings it about halfway back and lays down with it. Now, you're trying to coax it in, it's looking right at you, but it's sitting there chewing on it. So you take a step towards it, and it runs off. Which one of those 2 puppies is your candidate?
The last one.
Why?
I would say that he has a stronger, he, she, whatever, I'm guessing, so I'm probably going to be wrong, but I'm saying, based on what you said, I would think that dog has a stronger desire to win.
Yeah. Well, what I say when that puppy is looking at me, you know what he's thinking? He's thinking, this thing is way too good for Roger. I want to keep it myself.
Yeah.
It's that covetousness, okay?
Sure.
Now, that leads to a whole another issue altogether. So if you are a retriever trainer, okay, and you have a whole kennel full of these dogs, high-drive dogs that don't want to bring it back, your job is to train them to bring it back. Well, in the world of retriever trainers, every professional retriever trainer in the country I know of, they're all training force fetch, okay?
Right.
And you can train force fetch, but you can't start training a dog using force fetch until they're probably 7-8 months of age, because what you're doing to them, okay? And in fear-based training, the animal gets punished for every wrong decision. But with true reward-based training, where the animal gets rewarded for every right decision, you can take a 10 to 12-week-old puppy and teach it all the obedience it's going to need for the rest of its life in less than 10 minutes, and never ruin it. And you can train what we call fun fetch, in where the animal is getting rewarded for every right decision. By the time it's 3 or 4 months of age, is already retrieving. You've taught the retrieve to the dog. Okay. Now, what most people don't know is that a human animal learns 80% of what it's going to learn by the time it's 5 years old. A puppy learns 80% of what it's going to learn by what age do you think?
I know this answer, so I'm not going to participate. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm going to say 2.
2 years old?
14 months.
14 months.
What's that?
14 weeks. I'm sorry, 14 weeks.
14 weeks.
Yeah.
14 to 16 weeks. They're learning 80% of what they're going to learn. Okay. So they're just like little sponges. I do this over and over again, where we take puppies, we take them to these shows all over the country, and they're all 10 to 12 weeks of age. In fact, we just did one at Cabela's on Saturday when Donnie was there. Okay, and we had his little dog, okay, King Arthur, a beautiful little yellow guy, just fabulous. And we started him when he was, he's now about 14 weeks. We started him when he, at the first show at the Omaha Boat Sports and Travel Show, when he was about 10 weeks of age. And I mean, sat down, stay, come to his name, come to whistle, eye contact, retrieve, and they look like little robots. It's just mind-boggling to watch it. The only problem is, about once a month we have to train another puppy because we're doing another show. So we took his sister to the the Iowa Deer Classic, and then the following week I think we took Donnie's dog back to Eastern Iowa, where we're doing these shows with these puppies of probably 12 to 14 weeks of age. But at that age,
you took her to Eastern Iowa, and he was in the Iowa Deer Classic, because I actually attended that.
Oh, that's right.
And that's
right.
where that's the first time that I actually seen him. I think he was only 10 weeks old at that time, and actually got to see him actually retrieve the shed, and some of the commands, and the eye contact and just the control for 10 weeks old. I was just really amazed at that level. But I just wanted to throw that out there that's at 10 weeks old what I saw, but that's where I saw it was the Deer Classic.
So anyway, we start them, months ahead of when any conventional trainer would even consider training. And it's all because, like I said, when you understand how to get the animal to cooperate with you, we're using food on the puppies, okay, and they're motivated by that. But as the dogs advance, we're looking to convert the dog from food as a motivator to their toy as a motivator. And when you've made that conversion, okay, to the toy, then you move into a much higher level. And I'll explain to you what I just said. If you have a dog that you're using food as a motivator, okay, that's generally what they call Pavlovian. Pavlovian meaning you're using food to do it. And so if you've got let's say you're training a drug dog and you're using food as the motivator, and you get a call from the local school where they think that there may be some drugs in the local school, and they want you to come down and check it out. So when you get to the school, you find out that the drugs are in the lunchroom, and where the kids have just eaten lunch, and where they've wiped ice cream down the wall, their sandwiches laying all over the floor. And if you're using food and you walk in and ask the dog to search for the drugs, they're going to go around eating rather than looking. Where if it's their toy they're after, now that's a whole different thing. These high-drive dogs never get, they'll kill for that toy, whatever that toy is that you have created the obsession over. And when you're training bomb dogs or drug dogs, you're using their toy. They find the bomb or they find the drug, they get their toy, and they it's either a passive alert or an active alert. Passive means they set, if you're training bomb dogs, because you don't want the dog messing with the bomb. If it's a active alert, it's probably going to be drugs. And so if you're wanting to convert that dog over to that toy, and anyone who's had one of these crazy labs will just, you can't throw the ball enough times that you wear your arm out, and probably 2 hours later the dog's still wanting to chase it. Then that's some of the stuff that we're looking at when we're selecting the dog. There's a bunch of other things that we look at that are even more important than the retrieve work or the horn work itself, the obsession. And I'll give you an example. You can train any dog with obedience, set down, stay, come to its name, eye count, any dog. Okay, you can train to do that. And you can teach just about any dog to retrieve. But the real key long term on these dogs is hunt. They've got to have hunt. And if they don't have hunt, I don't care how good they do the rest of it, it doesn't count. They've got to get out there and hunt all day long, not just 5 minutes, not just for an hour, not just for 3 hours. They've got to go out there and hunt all day long, every day for that antler. And when you're training, I kind of got ahead of myself a little here. When you're training drug dogs, drug dog goes out to find the drug so he can get their toy, whether or not it's a tennis ball or PVC or whatever. Antler dogs go out to find the antler to get the antler as a retrieve. So it becomes one and the same. And so you're kind of what these dogs really are is they're hunting drug dogs, but they're a combination of a retriever, a hunting dog, a bomb and drug dog, all put together, because dogs just don't naturally go out and start looking for antlers or bombs or drugs or cancer or seizures until they're taught what it is they're looking for. And once they know what they're looking for, then they trade you that object in return for their toy.
Okay. All right, so let's back up for just a minute if we can.
Sure.
of course, I'm all mixed up because every bit of training that I've done has been, I would call it, yeah, I guess obedience and fear-based training, force fetching, things of that nature. So that's
Right.
all. This is all foreign to me. I've done one other podcast with a guy that trains shed antlers, dogs, whatever you want to call it. And this sounds way, way, way more technical than what he's doing. And I know that it'd be impossible for you to tell us how it is you put all these pieces together inside of an hour. But I guess one of the things that comes to mind is how do you keep the hunt in the lab just to the drugs or just to the horn or just to the bomb versus I guess when they're looking for drugs, they're probably in an airport or doing a search on a traffic stop or whatever the case may be. When you've got these dogs out in the wild, and running around in the timber, they're going to encounter different things. How is it that you keep them how is it that you keep them focused? I guess would be my question.
Well, I think that once again, as I said, it's about having the right dog, and that's so critical. Okay, but you can find the right dogs, but you can't find them at 8 weeks of age because no one knows what an 8-week-old pup is going to do. So when we get them at 8 weeks, we put 2 months of training into them, and we evaluate them based on what we have to have as an antler dog. We're looking at 5 or 6 different drives, and how these dogs score on these drives tell you whether or not the dog is going to make a horn dog or not. Now, getting back to so it's about having that right dog, and it's when you go hunting with a real a coon dog that's really good, or a bird dog that's really good. I mean, you don't have to motivate him. I mean, they're going to go out there and practically kill themselves to play the game.
Right.
Okay? When you have a first-class retriever, okay, and that's the reason the labs are so good. In fact, in trying to train, let's say, a German Shorthair, you can kind of get them trained to do this, but the first time a bird flies by, their mind is not on the ground. It's in the air and chasing that. Okay, and
Yep.
So, and beagles, great noses, but they have no interest at all in a piece of bone when they come to a rabbit, and they'll just go off on it in a minute. These labs that we're training, okay, because of our program and the kind of dogs that we're training, we get them to obsess over this horn as if it was a bird. And they will hunt all day long. Their drive is incredible to get that. Now, it takes a much better dog to be a world-class horn dog than it does either a bomb dog or a drug dog. You're absolutely right. If you're training a bomb dog or a drug dog, you're almost always working in a controlled environment, like in a warehouse.
Yep.
And when the dog finds it, he just has to tell you it's there. His job is over. I laugh because I say you can have a drug dog or bomb dog. It doesn't even have to know its name, and no obedience whatsoever. As long as he'll do that one job, just tell you where the drug or the bomb is, his job is over. Now, an antler dog has to go out in the woods and hunt all day long for that piece of bone, and when he finds it, he's got to bring it back to you because it's just the way it is. And when you see these top candidates, they will hunt all day long, day after day after day, and they never give up. So, and you just have to see it. And I know that sometimes it's kind of hard to envision how this works, but it does.
Yeah, and I can tell you, even myself trying to get, we've got a 14-month-old lab that, I spent quite a bit of time. Of course, I don't have the background or the knowledge, but tried to get him really where he had a lot of drive for the shed antler, and I could go out and put it somewhere and he would go get it and bring it back to me, and he did pretty well with that. And then as soon as I took him out and introduced him to quail, then afterwards went back out and put the sheds out, he was literally, I thought, what's he not smelling them? What's going on? And he was totally just driving, running right by him. And I even got to the point where I brought him right to me, and he knew they were there, but just totally ignored them because he was so focused on trying to find the live bird. And I think that's part of your program too, as far as really teaching them or instilling that to where that shed is what their drive is. That's what really gets them. And that's something that I wasn't able to do. And I'm sure it's a combination of the dog and the lack of training.
Would it be fair to say that, or at least I think it's fair to say that based on what I've heard, that you could probably have a dog that's capable of finding sheds, but not a dog that's capable of finding sheds to the level that you're training them at? Is that an
absolutely
accurate statement?
Yeah. And getting back to, let's say you had the 5 puppies in the litter. Okay, if I took that first one, out, and was training it, I would not consider it a horn dog. Okay, I just wouldn't. So puppy number 2, I take out after some training, and it may find a horn every now and then, but I still wouldn't consider it a horn dog. Puppy number 3, a little better, but for my money, it's not really getting the job done. Puppy number 4 should find 1 to every one you find. Puppy number 5 should find 3 to every one you find. Now, we went out last Monday, in a day and a half, we found 26 horns, okay? And I didn't find one. The dogs found them all. I mean, all on their own. It was a perfect day. It was like 30 degrees, rained the night before. I mean, it was just one of those really magical days. Now, we went out, that was in the day and a half. Now, we went out on Sunday, and we only found 4 horns, and the dogs found those. I didn't find a horn then either. Now, generally, when I'm out, you'll see a horn. When you're horn hunting, you have to realize you're 6 foot tall or whatever, how tall you are, and you can look out over a field where the dog is down on the ground. So so a lot of times you'll spot them before the dog does, and then you work the dog into the wind, and the dog then works the horn. But these dogs that we were hunting last Monday, there was no spotting, there was no anything. I mean, they just went out, and they were always probably 50 to 75 yards either in front of us or one side or the other, and they just was bringing them back. I mean, it was just, like I said, it was one of those magical type days. And I always say with a horn dog, if you're out hunting horns and you're finding horns and the dog isn't, then the dog's not working. The dog should be cooperating with you and at least bringing back as many as you're finding yourself. And the really good dogs, if you're like in a bean field and you walk up and you're looking for horns yourself and you look out and you see one out there 30 yards, okay, upwind, okay, the dog is doing exactly that same thing. They learn to recognize what they look like. And so the dog will go out to get the one that he sees, and a lot of times he'll find the offside going to the one that he sees, and then he'll go back and get the one that he sees. So the good ones are both sighting and smelling. They work both ways. And I actually think that, I don't know, I was saying that if I had a dog that would either do one or the other, sight it or smell it, I'd rather have one that would sight it. But on Monday, these dogs were smelling them. I mean, it was just, the scenting conditions were just perfect.
I guess everything that I've heard and had experience with respect to shed dogs was, 50% of the time, at best, they were going to find the shed before you did. And that was probably, in my estimation, an overstatement of what would actually happen.
I think go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. No.
I think that you're absolutely right. Okay, most of these dogs, okay, you're sighting them and then they're working into the wind. But I'm telling you that these really good ones, okay, they're doing it on their own. Well, the first time I really saw it happen, well, we'd been training all summer long. This was back in 2005. And we went to a high fence operation where I knew we were going to find horns. In fact, we found 100 horns, and I forget how many dogs. Maybe I took 10 dogs. But we're walking along this ridge, and the owner said, we looked down, there was a pond down below us, maybe 100 yards, and he said that a lot of times the bucks will stand on that pond dam and drop their horns. So we had a dog, and he sent him down towards the pond dam, and he was highballing down there. And he just stopped halfway down and went into a brush pile and came out with a horn. And and the guy I was with was just flabbergasted. As I mean, it was my first experience to find out whether or not this thing really worked. And on the way home, I called my wife and I said, we do have antler dogs. Up to that particular time, I wasn't really sure. Now, there is a way to test these dogs to find out whether or not they're really doing it or not. And it's the only way that I even know today, and that is you bait a field, and maybe it's a 50-acre field or 100 acres. It doesn't make any difference, pasture or whatever. And you put some horns out there, and you don't go back for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And when you go back, if that dog is still working those horns, you know that he's working the horns. It's not no foot tracking, no any your scent, no one else's scent on them, and it's an incredible thing to watch. I mean, like I said, I still marvel every time I watch one of these dogs run over the hill, and I'm looking the other direction, and they come back and they've got the horn, and you just think, wow, this is the coolest thing in dog sports. But especially if you're a deer hunter or horn hunter.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing to think that they're able to put that all together as well as what you're talking. That's amazing. That's what Donnie and I were just talking about prior to even dialing your number. Was just the struggle. I have I have a cockapoo that I took out, and I just let him chew on antlers, and I think by luck he ran into one in the timber, and he probably never will again. So I thought I had a shed dog, but you've ruined that dream for me.
Well, I tell the story, and well, I tell you what. Sometimes I have a guy call me, and he'll say, "Do you have any shed dogs for sale?" And I said, "Well, I've got this lab, and he's a pretty good dog, and I want $1,000 for it. But I have this cockapoo, and it is a fabulous horn dog." The guy says, "I'll buy the cockapoo. So if your dog is for sale, maybe I'll buy your dog." Yeah, but let me explain to you how some of this works, and I think you'll really start to understand it. Okay?
Yeah.
That if you take a teenage boy, and I'm going to talk about the difference between reward-based training, fear-based training, and value. Okay, value. Okay, value to a dog like to a duck dog. That duck has so much value that, I mean, they salivate at the sound of a quack, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a story. You take a teenage boy and you set him down at a table and you put an electric collar on him. And across from him, you put a real pretty girl. And you say to that teenage boy, every time you hit on that girl, I'm going to light you up. Some teenage boys you'd practically have to electrocute. Okay? Now, in that scenario, the boy, okay, is the dog. And across from him, you put a duck or a pheasant. So you can get away with using electricity, okay, in some fairly harsh methods because that value to that dog is so great. Now, exact same scenario. You have the teenage boy with electric collar on him. And across from him, you put a mannequin of the real girl. And you say, every time you hit on that mannequin, I'm going to light you up. You're probably not going to have to touch him. Okay? So if you're training with a collar and you're training a dog on ducks or pheasants or whatever, you can get pretty abusive because that has so much value to him. But if you try to train that same method with a bomb dog or a drug dog or an antler dog where you correct it with electricity, the game is no fun, and they'll quit and they will not play it. There's not enough value in the horn. Okay, so what you're doing with these dogs now, now as you progress with them, okay, you switch from food as a motivator to the antler as a motivator. And I've got a little black dog right now. I think that you literally, he's so obsessed with this thing. I mean, he can't think about anything except the horn. And that translates over to, once again, when you get to the field work. But I've built him up to that. Now, he had it to begin with, but I have built on it. It's a little bit like everybody's probably that's had a lab that was really a high drive dog. That a lot of times there'll be a tennis ball, and they can't even say where's your ball. They'll have to spell it, or the dog will go crazy. Okay, well, we're doing the same thing, but we're using the antler as that motivator, and that's, like I said, that's the first step. He has to be wildly crazy about it, but you have to put together the rest of it. He has to be willing to go out and hunt all day long for it. Guys call me all the time and they say, I've got a dog and I can take an antler and I can throw it out in the woods 50 times and the dog will go out and he'll never lose it. He'll bring it back every time. Do I have an antler dog? And I'll say, no, what you have is a retriever. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I'll say, well, if I'm training a bomb dog and I take a bomb and throw it out in the woods and he goes and gets it 50 times and brings it back, do I have a bomb dog? Well, of course not. Okay, they answer their own question. Okay. So it's more than just a retrieve. It's that willingness to go out and hunt, just as if it was a pheasant or a duck, at the same level, and run all day long, day after day, to hunt for that thing. And the really good ones do that. Now, when I say really good ones, they have to be really good. And now they have these contests for these shed dogs now, and what it is a fast retrieve class. And it's 6.5 minutes, I believe. And we don't compete in it because the majority of the people, or a great number of them that are competing in that, or have our dogs. In fact, I think it was last year there was 700 dogs that started, and our dogs took second and third out of all those hundreds of dogs. And the other reason we don't compete is I don't think it would be fair for me to compete against my own customers. I'm not going to do it. So, but there's a big difference between a fast retrieve and a dog that's willing to go out and hunt and find them.
That's kind of one reason, that I'm actually getting a dog off of Roger's, kind of learning a lot of this. And Roger has, I think, some different levels that you can, if you want to purchase a dog from him, you can get a pup or, do an intermediate level dog or even a finished dog, I believe. Is that right, Roger?
Yeah. When we get them at 8 weeks, like I said, we put 2 months of training into them, and then the new owner actually has to come and spend a couple of days with us so we can show them how to take their dog to the next level. Now, we have a book out on Amazon that tells you about how to train your dog, and we also have a DVD that runs for an hour. But if you get the right dog, okay, and selective breeding, I don't care what kind of animal thing you're into, whether or not it's deer or cattle or goats or whatever, everybody is selectively breeding, trying to get to the better quality animal. And that's exactly what we're doing. But even at what we're doing, and I give this, I have a red dog right now, and he's maybe one of the best dogs I've ever trained. I mean, a phenomenal dog, okay? And his sister, beautiful dog, is completely worthless. I mean, she just doesn't do a thing. I mean, she just doesn't have the drive. And so if you were just to go buy these two pups when they were 8 weeks old and were unlucky enough to get the female, I don't care how good a trainer you are, you just can't do it. I mean, they just will not. They don't have the hunt. I don't know how old you are, but it used to be a senator. I think his name was Strom Thurmond, and he used to get in front of the Senate. And when a bill would come across, it'd say, "This dog won't hunt," which means it's not going to happen. Okay, and that's the same thing with these dogs. If they won't put it all together, okay, and that is, like I said, you can train any dog with obedience, or you can train scent discrimination, or you can train the retrieve, but that drive to hunt. And that's the reason almost all these dogs, rarely do we ever have one that's more than 70 pounds, 75 pounds, that will really do the work, because they've got to get out there and they've got to hunt. They've got to move, okay, all day long, and that drive is what separates them from everything, from the other wannabes.
So I've got to ask you. You've been doing this long enough. Does color matter?
Does color matter? Oh gosh, how do I say that without politically being? I'm not going to be politically correct here. Okay, I think it does. Okay, now if you follow the history of labs, okay, when I was growing up, I never saw anything but a black lab. I didn't know there was anything such a black, because they came down from Newfoundland. So Newfoundlands are black. Okay, now, and this is a story I tell. I know it's accurate, but it's not a true story. We go back 25 years, and there's a retriever trainer there, and he has a black lab female, and he's got a chess male and a golden male, and the black bitch comes in season and gets bred by the chess. So this guy reports to the AKC that he has bred to a black male, to a black lab, to a black lab. But for some odd reason, the puppies came out chocolate, and he just can't understand why. Well, okay, that's how we got the chocolate lab. Okay, the next year, the golden got loose and bred the black bitch. And he reports that a black male to a black female lab, and guess what? We ended up with yellow labs.
Yellow lab.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. That's how it came about. Now, in that scenario, all three of these dogs are retrievers. Okay. Now, the next step in that was there was a guy who had a Vizsla, and he breeds the black lab, and guess what? We get red labs. And today, the silvers are, I mean, if you have any dog knowledge whatsoever, they bred the Weimers, and you got silver labs. But neither the Weimer nor the Vizsla are retrievers. They're bird dogs. They're pointing dogs. And that's the same way that you ended up with pointing labs. They because of those combinations. Well, as when you get away from in a lot of the trainers, okay, retriever trainers say it's all about black dogs and yellow males. Okay, they won't. And at the highest level in these horn competitions, you'll never see anything but a lab, and you probably never see a silver. Now you might see some reds, because there's some really, really, really good red dogs out there. But so that's kind of what you've seen happen with the labs today. These crossovers, and depending upon how they've this has kind of worked its way through. Some of them, if you breed outside of retrievers, lose some of that retrieve.
Sure.
And if you've messed with retrievers much, I mean, Goldens really can't compete with labs, nor can chesses as a rule. Now, if you're doing some really tough retrieving, say up in the ocean, saltwater, 29 degrees, you probably want a chess, because they can put up with that. But just overall, what you really want. Now, as I was studying all of this, I was trying to figure out, okay, if you have a bitch and she has chocolate and let's just say black puppies, that it appeared to me that the chocolates trained different than the blacks. And over a period of time, I just couldn't figure out how that could be. Well, all of a sudden one day, I think I figured it out. Well, if color can then not disposition also follow?
I would think so.
Yep.
And if you're training both chesses or both black labs and chocolates train different. Okay. Now they're tremendous dogs. I mean, and they're great for this work, but they don't train the same as a yellow dog. I mean, every now and then you get some that's kind of close, but my wife has a chocolate female, and I mean, she just trains different than these other dogs. And like I said, that's not really bad, but they train a lot more like a chess than they do a lab.
Are you able to turn out some chocolates and obviously I've seen the pictures of the yellows. Actually, I think I saw you with one at the Iowa show. So you do have luck with all different colors.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, with the chocolate, the yellow, the black, and the red, phenomenal results. Okay, once again, if you get the right dog. Now, like I said, if you get into the silvers, the one thing about this, all these dogs are going to make great pets. The lab is the most popular breed worldwide, 3-to-1 over any other dog, and there's a reason for that. They're multitaskers. You do bombs, drugs, cancer, seizures, family pets. I mean, they don't get you in trouble with your neighbors as a rule. They won't bite anyone. They're just the most popular breed. Okay, and so with these dogs, people ask me all the time, male or female. Well, a good dog is a good dog. It's the same thing. If it's a chocolate dog or a black dog, if it's a good dog, it's a good dog. So, we try to tell people that call and they say, I'd like to have a black male, and I say, well, it doesn't work that way. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, if I was selling racehorses and you called, would you ask me to sell you a gray mare? No, you'd say, you want the fastest horse I've got. When people call and they want a performance dog, they want the best. They got to have the best dog, or they're not a performance dog.
And to be honest, I mean, that's why I'm buying a dog. I mean, for the training and everything, and that's kind of how it went down. I mean, my wife and I went up and seen some of the pups, but again, at that point, it's easy to fall in love with them, but at that point, we didn't know for sure, what pup was going to be ours until Roger, kind of pointed and said, this dog's going to be a good dog, and this is the one that I think, should be for you. And because he knew that I wanted an intermediate dog, and I wanted something, that was going to hunt hard, and that's why I was putting that money out there. So. And now we know, and now he's in the process. So, well, I've been to Roger's facility and I've seen some of the training, and actually, I'll be going up there quite a bit throughout the summer, and I'll do some videos so we can actually post some of that, and so people can kind of see some of those different techniques and watch how the dogs work that are curious about, trying to get an antler dog. And then there's different levels of, depending on what, how much training you've had and how much you want to put into it, I guess. And Roger can lead you the right direction. But to my knowledge so far, what I've seen is I haven't found anything that would compare to what Roger's putting out there.
Is it reasonable to think that you can take a dog home you can fill in the blank with a number of weeks? You're not going to have a finished dog. From my experience, you have to work with them forever, it seems like, or at least, keep their mind in the game, so to speak. At what point do you send a dog home, or is it different with every dog?
Well, it's really different with every dog, but when we get them at 8 weeks of age, we put, like I said, the 2 months of training into them. Okay, and we have to talk money here a little bit. That started dog with 2 months of training, they're $2,500. Okay, then the next level of dog that we have is 6 or 7 months of age. They're already hunting horns in the field. the only real difference between them and a finished dog is field experience. And so, depending upon the time of the year you're getting your dog, there's a, for example, if someone called me right now and they wanted a finished dog today, because we're getting down to kind of the heat and vegetation are the enemies of these dogs. So when the vegetation starts up like in a bean field or cornfield, you can't really get the job done. So they'd be better off to get a pup, probably start a dog, and work with it through the summer, and then come next spring they'd have a finished dog. And but and you can train during the summer, but what we do during the summer is we'll work them in cut wheat. In the cut wheat, there's no vegetation, and they can work them just like it's in the middle of the winter if you're working early in the morning, okay, well, before it gets, anytime it gets kind of above 70 degrees, it starts to get pretty hard on them because of the amount of energy that they have to expend to work that, and you're not working them as long. So
sure.
But the training, my own personal dogs, okay, once you get them going, once again, you have to think about it as being a game. So I'll take my dog, and we'll go into the kitchen in the morning, and I'll pour myself a cup of coffee, and I'll tell the dog to set stay, and I'll go someplace in the house, and I'll hide the horn and tell the dog to find it. And I'll sit there and drink coffee while the dog goes down in the basement, goes in the laundry rooms, goes out in the garage. He has to search the whole house, and I don't even care if he finds it. What I'm looking for is how long the dog is going to hunt for it. And when we do these shows, okay, I tell people, like, let's say up in Iowa, if you didn't have all those deer mounts and stuff in there, you could hide that someplace in that arena, and that dog would continue to look in that arena, go up and down the rows, go upstairs. I mean, it just continues to look until he finds the horn. Now, all dogs learn what we call incrementally. It's how they learn. It's the way a child learns to read. For example, if you took your kid to school, and the first day the teacher gave your child a book and told it to read, it would never learn to read. It has to learn how to read first the ABCs, then a very simple word, and a little more advanced word, and a little more advanced word, and a little more advanced word. And if the dog goes to school, or the kid goes to school in Kansas, somewhere around his senior year in college, he can kind of read. Right, Donnie?
Yep. Yeah. Sort of. I still struggle.
Yeah, I went to school in Kansas. I still struggle, too. But
that's why I have a wife. But I actually learned in Indiana. It's about the same.
It's the same all over the country. But
yeah.
that's the way they learn. So when I say we can teach a dog all the obedience it's going to need for the rest of its life in 12 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, so it looks like this. When you ask a dog to stay, okay, you're at first it's stay a second, and then it's 3 seconds, and then it's 5 seconds, and then it's 30 seconds. They have to learn that way. And another example of that would be if you're training avalanche dogs. Okay, these are dogs that find people under avalanches. Okay, you never start with the body 20 feet under the snow. You start with the body laying on top of the snow, then it's an inch under, then it's 2 inches under, then it's 6 inches under, then it's a foot under, then it's 10 foot under. Okay, they have to learn it that way. So if you're training a dog to hunt for horns in the snow, okay, you have to train that dog exactly the same way, where he starts to work the snow, okay, and so you have to work your way down. It's just like a kid learns to read. And so any of this more complicated stuff, okay, it's all incrementally learned. So getting back to the 10-week-old pup, you tell it to stay, okay, it may just be, that first time may just be a flash. And we're using markers, okay, which gets into this more advanced training and how it works, okay. I'll go back and give you an example. Okay, when you go to California and you watch the dolphin trainers train, okay, and the people are sitting in the crowd and they're watching this, okay. Now, for the fish, but at the same time that the dolphin is working, the trainer is standing on the side of the tank, okay, and he's blowing away. Most people probably don't even notice that, But why do you suppose the trainer is blowing the horn, the whistle? He's doing that for a very specific reason. He's marking a point in the behavior in which the dolphin knows that if he reproduces that behavior, he's going to get the fish. Okay?
Yep.
So when we're training a dog, we're using markers too. Okay? We use the word ching. Okay? If I'm working with the zoo people, they use the word yes. If I'm working with the sea lion people, they're using the word good. It's just you're at a moment in time where the animal performs a behavior exactly at the point you want it to. You mark it, and then they get the fish. And it's only a reward if it continues a wanted behavior. So if you're training a dolphin, okay, it's got to be a fish, and he gets that fish for doing what he's doing. Okay, you want him to jump. And people don't have any idea as to when you're training a dolphin that jumps 8 feet, 10 feet, 12, 14 feet out of the water, you start at the bottom of the tank, the very bottom of the tank, and you take a diver, he goes down, okay? You take a rope at the midpoint in the pool, it goes down one side, across the bottom, and up the other side. The diver at the bottom is on one side, the dolphin is on the other side. Okay, the dolphin swims across the rope, the trainer above blows the whistle, and simultaneously the diver gives the dolphin a fish. Okay, the marker and the fish become one interchangeable. Now, they then raise the rope, okay, a foot off the bottom, and every time he swims across it, he gets the fish, the whistle and the fish. Now it's 3 foot off the bottom, swims across, he gets the whistle and the fish. Next thing you know is the rope is right across the top of the water, laying right on it. The dolphin comes up and rolls across it, the whistle and the fish. It's a foot off the water, jumps over it, whistle and the fish. 3 feet over, the whistle and the fish. It's how they learn. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. You absolutely have to go through that sequencing, because if you stood 10 foot off the water with that fish, the dolphin would starve to death. He'd never figure it out any more than than most kids can learn to read without the ABCs.
Makes sense.
So when you're training a dog to stay, first it's just a second, then 3 seconds, then it's 5 seconds. It's incrementally built up. So when I say we can teach them all their general obedience in 10 minutes, we're teaching them to stay for 20 seconds. We're teaching them eye contact for 5 seconds. It's all of this stuff is fundamental. It's the groundwork in which you have trained. Now you have to start building on that. Okay. For example, at the higher levels in the show, you have to put your dog in a down stay, and the dog has to stay there for 5 minutes. Well, the dog first he had to stay for a second, and then 3 seconds, then a minute, and then 2 minutes. You build up to it. That's how they learn it.
Jason, you had no idea you were going to learn about dolphin training, did you?
Well, no, I didn't.
That's crazy,
this is yeah, but I mean, having
a lot more in depth than what I'm sure you imagined.
Well, I got on the phone tonight thinking I was pretty smart about training dogs, because I probably got lucky, and I had the good fortune of like I said, knowing Mary and getting to hang around guys like Mike Lardy, for anybody who's a duck dog guy, and a few of the folks. I'm trying to think of the other fella's name. So I had some good tutors. But you're specifically training a dog to hunt antlers, and I'm starting to put it all together in my mind. And I got to be honest, a half hour ago it wasn't making a whole lot of sense. But now you started to talk about those incremental things, and I'm thinking of a blind retrieve. You don't start a blind retrieve at 400 yards. You start a blind retrieve at 20 yards, and
sure.
and
Sure.
and on and on and on and on and on.
Sure.
From there.
Sure.
And so although it's different, there's some similarities, but I can see, yeah. Well,
yeah, you'll enjoy this. I was doing a seminar, okay, and I'm talking about the stuff we're talking about. And there's a guy in the seminar. He raises his hand, and I addressed him, and he said, "Look," he says, I don't know if this. He says, "I don't think this stuff will work." He says, "Because I'm training retrievers, and sometimes those dogs will be out there 200 to 300 yards, and when I give them a command, they've got to respond. And I'll say, well, the people who trained the original monkey astronauts, where those monkeys were millions of miles out in space, and they asked them to pull the lever. They did it flawlessly every single time, millions of miles. Okay? And so it's just a matter of, once again, you have to I had to completely change everything that I thought that I knew about training, okay? And because when I was seeing the kind of stuff that these people were doing, you have to be numb not to understand that you can do it. And you once again, whether or not it's a duck dog or seizure dog, bomb dog, I don't care what it is. Okay, and when you're training animals, okay, you've got to divide it up into domestics, okay, like dogs and horses and animals like that, versus wild animals. Okay, now training a wild animal is many, many times more difficult than training a domestic, because you have so many issues that you have to overcome that, just believe me. And on top of that, okay, they can kill you. Okay, if the first people that were trying to train the dolphins went into the tank with a pocket full of fish, I guarantee you they were going to get killed. Okay, but when you're training something that can kill you, okay, there's a term in business that's called thinking outside of the box. I coined the phrase training inside of the box. When you're training something that can kill you, you better have the entire routine totally worked out outside of the cage before you ever step in, or you're going to get killed. And you do that, okay? Now, we talked about rewards, okay? All animals learn the same way. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. We use positive reinforcement and positive punishment. Now, positive punishment doesn't look like what most people think is punishment. It's generally taking away something from the animal that they want. Now, if you're using, I'm getting real scientific here, if you're using food as a motivator, well, it's only a reward if it continues a wanted behavior. There's always a hierarchy of reward, and you're always trying to figure out what is a reward to the animal. Because if it's not a reward, they won't continue the behavior. Okay. On the other side, it's only punishment if it stops unwanted behavior. Okay. And so if the dog jumps up on you and you whack it and it continues, it really wasn't punishment. In fact, if it's not punishment, it's probably reward. And so This stuff was figured out by some of the most brilliant human researchers that ever lived. Like I said, B.F. Skinner, the father of modern-day human psychiatry and psychology. I mean, they were studying this stuff to try to figure out how to use it on animals, okay? Like in medicine, they try it out on the white rat. It doesn't kill the rat, so they try it out on us. In psychology, they were trying these things out on the different animals to see how they responded so they could figure out how they could train them. And then they carried that over into all this remarkable stuff that they were doing for the military, and it just crazy stuff. I mean, just stuff that you wouldn't even in a million years watch a chicken go through, play tic-tac-toe, or watch a chicken go through an agility course, weave poles, and I mean, and homing pigeons that are detecting snipers in Vietnam, and how they went about doing those things. Okay, it was just, and if we had time, I mean, it was so much fun to watch the creative process. And when I first went down to watch this taking place, at that same time I was studying magic. And I started to see what I thought was a direct correlation between magic and training these animals to do these behaviors. And where the magic comes in is that if I show you a coin and make it disappear, you may think that it actually disappeared, but it didn't. I did something to it. Sleight of hand, mirrors, smoke and mirrors, I mean, a lot of different things. Now, if I show you how I made that coin disappear. You now know how I did it, but you may not be able to do it without a tremendous amount of practice. Well, they were doing exactly the same thing. Somebody really creative figured out how to make that coin disappear. Now, when you come over to these animal behaviors, okay, and you see the things that these animals were doing, the thought process is almost exactly the same. How might we get this animal to do this, okay? And when, like I said, when you see, I mean, I have the videos and tapes, and I mean the books, and I mean all, and how they did all of this stuff. And when you start to understand it, okay, the thinking process is very similar. You've got to, first of all, believe that you can get it, that you can do it, and that you have to figure it out, okay?
That's very interesting. And it would be really neat to kind of learn some of that. I mean, you know, I struggle with just trying to keep the dog from jumping up, but just what you're talking about is a whole other level. You know, I mean, I just can't imagine, which, you know, I'm excited to learn more about it. But, man, it would take a lot of years to get what you're at. I mean, you're covering a lot of information.
Well, I'll tell another story so you guys how some of this stuff works. I don't know. It was about 2 years ago. I was training, and I got to thinking, and we sold a dog to a neurologist in Illinois. He has actually 3 of our dogs, and so I called Doc, and I had a couple of questions. First question that I asked him, I said, "Doc, when you get mad, does your body chemistry change?" What do you think he said?
Yes.
Yes.
How fast?
Instantly.
Instantly. Okay, now, the reason I was thinking about that, when you're training a seizure dog, do you know what a seizure dog is?
Yep.
Okay. Both of you?
Yeah.
Okay. They're a dog that cues on up to 20 minutes before before a person is going to have a seizure. How does the dog know that that's going to happen? Well, your body chemistry starts to change. The dog recognizes that and cues you. There's a whole process that you go through in training these dogs to understand that, okay? Well, as I thought about that, now let's say you're training your dog, okay, and he's not doing what you want it to do, and you get mad. You think the dog knows that you're getting mad?
Yes.
Yes.
Or at least can sense a change.
Well, no, he knows you're getting mad, okay. And generally what happens if you're training fear-based training, something bad happens to him, like he gets his neck stretched, okay, or he gets shocked, okay? That happens. So believe me, they understand when you're getting mad, okay, and they really want to please you. That's the reason that if you can test a dog's intelligence with electric collar, and if you've used one much like I did historically, when you put an electric collar on a dog, okay, and you light him up, he'll do one of 3 things. He will either come running to you for relief, or he will run off, or he will stand there and let you just melt him into the ground. Okay, the dog that comes to you for relief, you can train. The one that runs off, and you can still kind of train them. But that dog that just stands there, helpless, while you can just see him jump every time you hit him. Okay, that dog is almost impossible to train because there's so much fear that he doesn't know what to do, and so he freezes. Now, so once again, if you're training fear-based training, you're going to get a certain reaction from the dog, and the dog, depending upon how sensitive they are, okay, and I find almost every dog that I have ever trained, no matter if it's a pit bull or a poodle, okay, that they start to understand, okay, when you're mad. And I think maybe a perfect example of that is I had a pit bull. And I love that dog. I mean, he was so nice to train. But if you started getting after him, okay, he would quit. He would just plain quit. Now, he trained a lot more like a mule. I trained lots of mules too. And they say mules are stubborn. You can get mules to do I've got a mule that'll do at least 50 tricks. But you start punishing a mule, and they're just going to quit on you. I say that almost anybody can train a horse if you're smart enough or strong enough. You get up on them and you just kind of bully them around. You try to do that same thing with a mule, and you're probably going to get killed. Okay, they train totally different. Okay, it's how they adjust to the amount of, once again, pressure that you're putting on them. And if anybody ever if they can't follow this conversation, the only thing you have to basically do is look at the zoo people or the sea lion people, I think the perfect example of it is that when you go to California or wherever and you watch them train birds to ride bicycles or play the guitar or do all kinds of different things, okay, they have to literally be. You can't beat them, you can't shock them, you can't choke them, and they literally have to be taught how to do that. Okay, and if you can teach a bird to ride a bicycle, surely you should be able to train a dog, if you have the right dog, to go out and get a bone and bring it back from a simplistic standpoint.
Well, there you have it, our conversation with Mr. Roger Sigler. Certainly, without a doubt, you could fill up a month of shows relating to shed dogs and the training of shed dogs and those types of things. So if you have more questions, don't be afraid to reach out to Roger at antlerdogs.com. That's Antler, ANTLERDOGS.com. And Roger will have a contact us button in the top right-hand corner of his website where you can contact him about any of the dogs that he has coming up for sale or training or whatever questions that you want to ask him. Roger also has a book out called Antler Dog Tales. He's got a training DVD called Antler Dog. I believe it's another one is Fun Fetch Antler Dog Video, and some other stuff on his website. Again, that's antlerdogs.com. That's about all I've got for this week. Thanks again for tuning in and making this show as successful as it is. We hope that you found value in this show like you have the others. Again, if you have an idea for a podcast, don't be afraid to give us a shout out on any of our social media channels. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that anytime we produce an episode of our web show or a podcast, you'll get a notification. I'm going to save you all from the pain and agony of me giving you directions on how to download a podcast and all that garbage. I just want to say, again, a special thanks to Roger for taking time out of his day to speak with us, and a super special thanks to you guys, the listeners, for tuning in and making this show as successful as it is, and especially want to thank Ozonics for their support. Without any of y'all, we couldn't do what it is that we do. So with that, Jason out.